Hi, everyone. This is Earthfiles YouTube channel, and I have Chocolate here tonight because Fluffy is down playing and sometimes will cooperate. And Chocolate has been going to sleep almost in my arms, and I'm going to put him down. But I wanted you all to see him and his brother, who we'll get next week, to thank you on behalf of Chocolate and Fluffy from the hundreds of you who have been sending me emails and even handwritten letters to say that you hope that the cats and I are okay after that strange, puzzling fog-like, smoke-like material that came into my office back there in the corner in the upper shelf on October 3rd. So it was about 2 weeks ago. And that many of you worried and wondered if there could be something that would be ominous or negative. And I want you to know that we've all been fine. Everybody is so far doing well. And that in fact, that I would say that I have gotten maybe, I don't know, maybe 100 emails from people who would be in that world of meditation and studier of East Indian, let's say, practices having to do with meditation and various spiritual traditions, in which something that is a grayish white, let's say a moving fog or smoke, is associated often with somebody who is close to the person who sees it in either a human family way or animal pets. And in the last couple of years, I lost another pair of brothers that I had for 18 years. And it was a passing that was so hurtful. And I loved that cat so much, and he was so ill at the end. And early on, back when we started the Earthfiles YouTube channel, I talked about how, to my complete stunned kind of left brain, because there's much of me that is left brain and analytical, and much that is also right brain and intuitive. But I still, if I had heard what I literally saw with my own eyes and my own mind, about 2 years ago when one of my cats named Simba passed, that at the night after his passing and my feeling like I would never stop crying ever again, I woke up looking up into an oval of light. It was absolutely there, and I remember my adrenaline running and my getting out of the bed. And because here was Simba inside of this oval of yellow-white light, and it had what looked like a spiral in gray going back behind Simba. He was clear, he was alive, he was communicating, I'm here, and I went to grab him. And this tunnel portal with the yellow-white light around it, and this spiral, it was a very clear spiral going out behind Simba, just faded away, sort of in my arms away. But it was so vivid, it was so real, there was nothing about it that I wasn't in a dream state, I was in an adrenaline full awake. And that has to be like some of these ancient paintings where there will be an oval and it will have light or flames, and there could be a human, a god, a creature inside. That's what I experienced with that cat. And it has occurred to me as all of your very insightful and extraordinary emails that have been coming to me about your own experiences in your life with high strangeness that fall into these categories that are probably more important and have something to do with the human soul than anything we are ever taught in our life. And that it would explain why so many of you in your very first sentences to me are saying, I've never told anyone this ever before. And I remember feeling in my life that, as I talked to you about last week, of being 6 years old and lying, going to bed, to me, was this repeated pattern where my head would go down on my pillow and my body is lying on the bed and I'm awake, but I'm waiting for a very specific feeling. And I'm telling this again because some people have asked me questions in emails since last Wednesday. And so I thought I'd go over this just a little bit more because there's something important here. When I'd feel this specific feeling, waiting for it, a young child, never having anybody talk to me about this, and in my life, never talking to my parents or my brother or anybody until just the last 10 years. This was something that I experienced and seemed to have some intuitive knowing that it was really important, that I had to pay attention, that I had to do this over and over again, but I really wasn't to talk about it. And so at that, in my case, there is this feeling, and then I'm slowly rising, but I'm completely aware of this body part of me on the bed, but there's this lovely slow rise going up to this cottage cheese-like ceiling. And what I was trying to explain about that tetra, the neon tetra, that beautiful blue-green line on a neon tetra, that was the color. The light outlined the kernels, the white kernels in the cottage cheese ceiling. Not big, just outlines, hundreds and hundreds of outlines of this tetra blue light around these kernels. And it was in looking at that beautiful outline that I just wanted to keep getting closer and closer and closer and go into it. I wanted to touch, probably more than anything, some part of me, even though my body's on the bed. I just wanted to touch this exquisite, beautiful neon tetra blue. So I'm not trying to go into light as much as I'm trying, as a young child, seeing these beautiful outlines, that I want to touch it. And I do want to keep getting closer, and that part is true. I would like to keep getting closer and go into whatever these lines of the blue light are. And that is when I would hear in my mind that thought voice, very sternly, no, you cannot pass through. And every single time I'd be back laying in the bed in my body and go to sleep. So whatever that voice was, to me, it was very protective, and it is a voice that has been with me through my life, and it has been extremely protective. And so people have asked questions about, was I being denied going into the light? No. I think I was being told, you are not going to go out through the roof and out into the cosmos, because there can be danger if you don't know what you are doing when you're in out of body. That's the way I ended up over the years interpreting it. And so I hope that is a bit clearer, but it sets the stage for talking about the one of a letter that I got, I want to go into, that I thought was a kind of a summary of a lot of the emails from all of you. And I wanted to start tonight in a more official way by talking about this question that comes up over and over to any of us who have had these out-of-body experiences. It's a question or a series that have haunted me, and that is, what part of us is doing the out of body? Is it our very soul? Or another layer of mind, body, spirit that is unknown or not discussed in our modern world? Because if you go back to the ancient Egyptian world, they not only believed, they lived that the soul was the most vital part of being in a human body on this planet. And they called it the Ka-Ba. And it was made up of many parts. Tonight I'm just going to go briefly through 9 parts in this puzzle about which part, as a young child, would separate and go to a ceiling or even out over the neighborhood. What is that is doing it? The Egyptians thought that the soul was an eternal force of evolving life energy that resided in every human being. And the most ancient Egyptian after-death writings break the soul down this way. 1, the person's physical body had to be mummified so that the soul could have intelligence after death for eternal life beyond the physical body that had lived on earth. And then there was the person's spiritual body. It represented the dead physical body. It was the spirit that could pass into the afterlife to interact with many different entities there. And then, of great importance, was the person's heart. More than the beating organ that keeps blood flowing in a live human body. No, this heart, to the Egyptians, was a vital part of the soul that was a drop of blood from the heart of a child's mother taken at conception in the womb. In life, that soul heart was considered the center of emotion, thought, will, and intention. In death, that soul heart was the key to the afterlife and was carefully preserved and stored inside or with the mummified body after the mortal death of the organic body on this planet. Then there was a 4th part of the soul, the Ka. This was the person's double. The Egyptians thought it was the vital life essence in the soul that distinguishes a living person from a dead person. In Western religions, this would be an historical description of sort of a singular soul. Well, in the Egyptian perception, the Ka was represented as a second image of the king or a deity or a person, and that's why it was translated as a double. And strangely, the Egyptians thought that the soul's vital life essence was sustained by food and drink on both sides of life and death. And that's why sustenance was placed with the mummified body. 5th, the Ba was the person's personality that made them unique. This was an aspect of a person that Egyptians thought lived after the body's death, joining the Ka in the afterlife. For the Greeks, this would have been the psyche. That was what they perceived as an individual human soul itself. And this would be like the Egyptian Ba, the personality of the person in the soul. 6th, then, there was a person's shadow. This was always outside the organic body, but very close to the body in life. And after death, the person's shadow was sometimes echoed in statues of the dead person linked to the shadow in the statue. Then, the 7th. This was a person's power form. This was a mysterious portion of the soul that scholars defined as the living force or life force of the soul, not the body, but of the soul, and that it exists in the afterlife to sustain the soul more than the fluid and the food. And something very similar, in many ways, to the earlier description of the Ka. They seem sort of similar. The 8th soul part is the person's name. The name given to a person at birth becomes part of the soul, and that soul part would live as long as that name was spoken. The name is the living person's identity, experiences, memories, and that's why cartouches surround the names to protect the name on the life side and then into eternal life. And then there was the ninth part of the soul in the Egyptian world, and this was the person's intellect from life to afterlife, and it was called the Ach. For the Egyptians, the thoughts of a human mind are a living entity. They think of our thoughts as a living entity from the soul itself, and that it goes with the soul to be active in the afterlife, which might explain reincarnative memories. But which part of the body-soul-spirit complex in a 6-year-old child separates out of the child's body and rises to the ceiling of their bedroom or out through the ceiling over the trees in the neighborhood when there's been no instruction, no parent, no sibling, no one has taught the child anything? It is a spontaneous occurrence, as if it is a very, very important part of some kind of relationship between the body, spirit, mind complex and the soul, which, if it is the eternal part, must know how to go in and out of bodies. Now, I was explaining that I thought the thought voice that stopped me from going out of the ceiling, and this was repeated many, many times, was there protecting me from something that could occur, and that I am becoming so grateful for these dialogues that have been provoking in me more memories and more thoughts about these questions, and how important might these childhood out-of-body experiences be for the training of the soul by the divine field itself, and that we are missing that intimate connection in the modern world that we live in now. It has been homogenized and pasteurized and put in to dusty pages and no longer seems to be a real part of human life, and yet it may be the most important of everything that we have, that we can process, that we can learn, that we can do, is the relationship between the body and the earth and the universe, and what happens at the moment of death, and where that soul life and all of those memories and all of that living and all of that knowledge continues to accumulate. And where do we go? I want to share with you now from a 42-year-old man who writes, quote, "I was born in 1976 and raised by my grandparents in a somewhat fundamentalist Southern Baptist household. My grandparents, who financially speaking were middle class or lower middle class, provided by all accounts a fairly comfortable and normal childhood, but human society, generally speaking, always seemed sort of ridiculous to me. I never felt like I belonged here on earth. I don't remember much from my childhood, but one day when I was roughly between the ages of 6 to 8, I remember lying in bed on my back, and for some reason, I was overcome by grief. I was desperately praying, pleading, sobbing to God. Please come and take me from earth. I don't remember how long this went on, but at some point, I started to notice that I was floating upward toward the ceiling. Our house had a popcorn or cottage cheese textured ceiling like mine in Idaho. And just about the time that my nose would have come close enough to touch the ceiling, absolute panic and fear swept over me. And the next thing I knew, I was back lying in the bed. I think that scared me so much that I had no control over the rate of rise from my body up to the ceiling. And I was getting closer and closer and closer to the ceiling, which I knew I could not go through. Here is another blocked. Panicked and shocked. I think I told myself I better not try that again, and I think I cried myself to sleep. At some point later, days, months, years, I don't really remember, I would often think, I wonder what would have happened that night if I had not gotten so scared. Many, many years later, I learned of and researched to some degree out-of-body experiences by Robert Monroe and others, and near-death experiences. And around the age of 27, I bought books and made some small, short-lived attempts at trying to have a controlled and relaxed out-of-body experience with no success. Like many other people that you have talked to, Linda, about in your YouTube broadcasts, I have not talked about this with anyone. I've now come to accept or believe that my conscious awareness perceives this illusory space-time continuum for a reason, which I may not consciously know or remember until I die in that transition out of this human spacesuit, or the container, as supposedly and reportedly what some of the ebon gray beings call our human bodies, containers. On a side note, the smoke-like image in the corner of your video, I have no idea what it was, but I agree with the others that a multidimensional or spiritual entity, either remote viewing or disembodied, would seem to me to be a plausible explanation. I also am skeptical that it was just a coincidence, that it appears in a video where you are talking about and encouraging people to divulge childhood out-of-body experiences with you on that Earthfiles YouTube channel. And when you think back, I was introducing and asking the question that night for all of you who have had any childhood experiences to get in touch with me. And here comes this high strangeness, 2 minutes and 32 seconds into news that was leading up to a discussion having to do with childhood out of body that I am now realizing for the first time in my life that I have scratched the surface of a huge iceberg. How many of you, how many people in this planet, as a young child, had this disconnect from their body, leaving them with an internal knowledge that was not taught in school, was not taught in church, was not taught anywhere because it is not discussed. And yet it may be an insight to something having to do with what we humans really are, more than our flesh and our blood. And that is one of the mysteries that I have tried for a very long time to dig more into because of investigating the presence of alien intelligences on our planet, through our solar system, and out through this universe. If other life forms, no matter how many light years from here, were responsible for creating the double helix DNA molecule, and that they have seeded planet after planet in solar system after solar system, in galaxy after galaxy, and there are trillions of galaxies, and that the double helix DNA is a key not just to life here, but a key to life throughout this particular universe, then our beginning to be able to be honest with each other about these highly strange and mysterious processes of our childhood that may be training because we have a link to something that is much greater, and that in that link to something much greater, we are linked to all intelligence in this universe, just as photons may be all linked, together in this entire universe. and that then relating to light begins to be something that entangles you in what you think is an individual with all light in the universe. And maybe that gets truer to what our real natures are and why we are haunted about being on a planet where we have been kept artificially in a concept that we are alone in this vast universe. Who would be served by such a notion? And that maybe right now, finally, we are close to a kind of new freedom in which we're all going to be able to talk with each other, not only about what our souls might really be, and what reincarnation might really be, and what the relationship of this universe to a divine field might really be, and that there are many other intelligences that might be related to our very DNA, and we to them. I find that exciting. I don't find any of this scary. What I do find is how exhilarating it is to have this discussion with you through the YouTube and start getting back the remarkable emails that I am getting from all of you. And on that note, Lori, what I'd like to do now is transition into your questions and comments, because I think that I am gathering a body of information from you in the world that maybe can begin to be the tissue and the fluid and the blood of another book that I would like to see maybe we would all contribute to, about this issue of what is the soul and what is its relationship to the universe and other intelligence and the divine field. And that is a journey worth taking. So, how about some questions and comments?
Great, Linda. I have a couple of comments I thought you would find interesting first. Hi, Linda. I raised a little deer that got sick, and the vet and myself could not get her better. The night she died, she awoke me in my bedroom by running around my bed. I could not see her, but it was her for sure. And then Robin said, years later, I lost a much-loved horse who awoke me by blowing on my face until I woke up, and then he was gone. And then the last comment about the anomaly is, what if that smoke anomaly was actually Linda, but during a different time or time frame?
Wow, that's one to ponder. Would the person talking about the deer, can they type back to you, do they mean that they were seeing a translucent form of the deer as if the deer was in a different form and not a physical form, or do they mean in a physical form running around the bed? I'd like to understand that better.
Okay, Robin, let's see your answer. So I'll move on to a question while we're waiting for Robin. Hopefully she's still with us. Lori, please ask Linda this. My mother said my experiences were from the devil. My granny said they were angels. How would a child of 6 respond?
Devils and angels, always the opposites, always the yin and the yang, the dark and the light, hate and love, death and life. Why are they juxtaposed? I think that in centuries past, the parents and grandparents have used fear of things like don't let the devil near you, don't let the gnomes get to you. I think that was once upon a time sort of a way of perhaps corralling and disciplining children. And today, I guess we don't reach to that as much. But any way you cut it, I think that the adult world deserves the children world to give the context of anything that is occurring is not cast as angels or devils, ever. That humans, adults, try to give the most objective left brain analytical explanation for all things first, with the idea that all of us, everybody on the planet, we don't have a singular definition of an angel. We don't have a singular definition of a devil. We are haunted in many ways, probably at the very core of every soul that is conscious. We are haunted by these questions of how could there possibly be, in a 13.8 billion light-year universe that was created by a divine field, that in this universe, everything about the divine field seems dedicated to eradicating evil. So how is evil made in a universe created by a divine field? The closest answer that I've ever received is the one that we've talked about here, and I have done radio programs and Earthfiles reports about, and that was with Thomas Campbell. And he is a physicist who's done a tremendous amount of writing, huge books. He worked for Army intelligence at one point in his career. But he is the one who is going to have this legacy of saying that the only way that this universe makes sense is that it is a computer simulation, and that it was created for one reason and one reason only, to be an entropy reduction. Entropy, I'll stop and define that right now. Entropy, E-N-T-R-O-P-Y. Entropy is the winding down of energy in every single system in this cosmos. Stars die. People die. Comets die. Everything dies in this universe because entropy, the winding down of energy, is what dominates. We could be in a universe where entropy did not dominate, and that there was no death, there was no dark, there was a complete opposite. Can't imagine. You wouldn't even be able to break anything in that universe. But it could exist. So Thomas Campbell looks at our cosmos as a creation by a divine field on purpose, to have dark and light in it, to have entropy be dominating. So what would be the reason? He calls this universe an entropy reduction trainer for souls. Now, how do you reduce entropy? You reduce entropy by loving. You reduce entropy by cherishing life, helping life grow. You increase entropy by seeking light, trying to spread light as a metaphor for all things that are related to life force, eternal life, evolution upward, souls growing in bodies and recycling in bodies in order to learn more in their evolution out of this universe, perhaps into a divine field. That is the only explanation that I've ever heard that can make any logic about being in a universe in which evil and angelic reside juxtaposed, even on a planet like Earth. And I would love to hear what some of you think. I don't have hard answers, but the whole idea in our dialogue for this month of October is, what have we been exposed to in our living life as individuals in which we have had insights about these questions? And that is an extremely important question. Why would any parent say to a child that what they were dealing with was the devil? And so now let's take another question, Lori, going beyond that.
You bet. So the next question is from Drew. Do you think self-activating technologies, either reach or by touch, could possibly be accounted for in history via magic scrolls? You read it and it activates tech.
That the magic scrolls, you mean that they will begin unrolling by eyes looking at them? Is that what?
I think what he means is self-activating technology. So you would read a magic phrase off of a scroll and it would activate some technology.
Yeah, I think it is. See, self-activating technology is a phrase that I introduced back in 2007 to 8 when I was studying those dragonfly drones. And they were supposed to be entirely self-activating software, and the whistleblower who released these documents to me at Earthfiles and to Lex at Coast, and we were allowed to put the documents in our website. It's at Earthfiles now. You could go to my search and put in Dragonfly, and you'll see all of the reports that I have done on these strange Dragonfly technologies that the releaser, the whistleblower releaser who put the documents and let us said, you must put the documents up exactly as I give them to you, or I will take them down. And we had them not as individual documents to us physically. They were provided to us from a website, and that's how he controlled what we had. And I was able to communicate with him. And one of my questions to him was that I did not understand at the time what his phrase was, self-activating software. And in communication with me privately, he used this analogy. He said, we can type in a typewriter or put in a computer words on a piece of paper. And we take the time to put the words on the paper, and we either send them off in an email or we go through something more tedious. We get an envelope, we fold it, we put it in, we go to a post office, we mail. He said self-activating software would take all of that away. He said, think of it this way. You think in your mind. You may have a piece of physical paper to start out with, but that's it. Or you may not even need this. You may just think the paper, and then something in your office will create the paper. But let's say that we start with the paper. All you do is think an intent to the paper that is made out of holographic, self-activating software, the entire paper. And all the paper needs is touch, thought, intent. And you just think what it is that you want to say. The paper organizes, puts it in any format you want. Then all you do is think, I want this to go to John Smith over at 57th and West Fifth Avenue. And it may be a mile from you or 4 blocks from you, and the paper will know how to transport itself. In rain, snow, it doesn't matter. The paper will know how to get there. It will show to the person. It will receive a reply, and it will end up back in front of me with all of this taking place in a few minutes. That would be self-activating software as defined by the whistleblower having to do with these Dragonfly drones. So if you take the idea that in ancient times, 5,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago for Göbekli Tepe in southern Turkey, that there was some kind of cohabiting between human beings and, let's say, advanced intelligences that would explain the Anunnaki, the Sumerians, the Greeks, and so forth. And that in perhaps the Chinese area and East India, wherever they had scrolls. I heard this from a man who worked for the CIA back 30 years ago. He said he was on an assignment to find exactly what you're asking about. He said that he went with a partner. They had a specific place in New Delhi. They went to the address, and what they were working for an MJ-12 unit. And their whole goal was to find a self-activating, preserved, specific kind of scroll that was not made by humans. It was extraterrestrial technology. And he said they had to go down off of the sidewalk. They had to go down under a building. You would never have known that there was this labyrinth under this building in New Delhi. And he said in a alcove next to the room where they went to see this ET technology, there was an alcove, and it had a gray android in it. He said it appeared to be like you suspended animation. And he said in this room, the monks were the only ones that could touch. They went and got this, we'll say, like a scroll, and they brought it to the two men working for the CIA, according to him. I wasn't there, but this is secondhand testimony from, he's supposed to be firsthand. And he said the monks, it was a scroll like this, and they did something, and it started to unfold, which sounds like that's what you're asking. And that as they looked at what was on there, they didn't understand it, but there were symbols. As their eyes moved, the scroll moved, but this was the part that astonished him that I remember. The symbols all glowed. They glowed a yellow golden color in what would have otherwise, he thought, that they were going to see a paper scroll, like a normal ancient paper scroll, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, only looking new. He said, no, this was some kind of technology that was being preserved by these monks off of this sidewalk in New Delhi, and that when it opened up, the writing glowed. And they weren't allowed to touch it, the CIA guys. But they were able to report back that, yes, this place existed. Well, what should we call it? Self-activating glowing scrolls are those? Do they relate to the gray, even-looking character, like in suspended animation in an alcove as they went into this room? What is the relationship? In the past, what were humans relating to advanced intelligences cohabiting on the surface of this planet, apparently? And today, we have been kept so far in the dark that we're now waiting impatiently for the global headline that we're not alone in this universe. So there are these juxtapositions in ancient history that are totally the opposite of the lies and policies of denial that we have been living with since World War II. And that self-activating software is a big part of it. Lori, what about one more question?
All right. I have Billy who says, hi, Linda. Do you think our government has a closer relationship to aliens than any other country?
What an interesting question. Closer. I mean, I guess we want to define closer. I think that the answer is that it's not really clear that anything is really close. Because even if you go to the current modern effort to get the black world into the white world by To the Stars, that Lou Elizondo in the Pentagon between 2007 and 2012 was running something called Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And that was supposed to have been funded through an advanced Aerospace Weapons, an advanced weapons system office. And so weapons and threat are in both of those titles. When you talk, as I have, with whistleblowers over the years, one of the things that has impressed me is how many times that people who have served in the military or intelligence will say to me, "You've been exposed to a lot, Linda, but the question that we want to know is what are the real agendas of the alien intelligences on this planet? What are the real agendas?" And that jumps to my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, a big section that I have about two guys, NSA, CIA. I referred to them as the writers, and they communicated with me between 1993 and 1994 through floppy disks back then, you know, those little 3-inch ones. And in my Glimpses Volume 2, every word that they ever communicated to me, I have reprinted in there, and one sentence has always stayed in my mind. It is a lens through which I put everything that I am exposed to, even the most positive. The non-human entities that our government is dealing with are neither benign nor neutral. Neither benign nor neutral. That implies a side that is not peaceful or not allied with us, but may not be at active war, but that may be dealing with us and this planet in very deceptive ways. That deception seems to be the hallmark of the UFO, UAP phenomena, not just in the last 70 years, but forever. So if deception and not being benign is a part of it, is there also evidence, strong evidence, that we are also dealing with other intelligences that are truly our allies, that are benign, who have our interests in mind, who want us to evolve? I think the answer is clearly yes. There are many people who have talked about how they felt protected by some entities, healed by some entities, their children were protected, that their children were allowed to grow and have a healthy life because of the presence of entities. But then when you come back to a wider field and you then look at the UFO phenomena and the abductions, entities, both negative and positive, in their relationship with humans, we come back to this whole question of, do we have allies, do we have enemies, or are we dealing with intelligences that are self-serving? And in their self-servingness, some could be benign because humans, they need humans for some reason, just as you go to the other big area of animal mutilations that have been going on in this planet, not just in the last century, but have probably been going on for thousands of years. So what would animal mutilation serve? The harvesting of genetic material to make various genetic bodies, I'm assuming. And so the landscape is difficult to understand. I think it still is. I think that people who are whistleblowers, they themselves are confused about what they have been exposed to. But I have never yet, and this is a fact, I have never yet talked with a man who could prove to me with a DD-214 or other documents that he has served in the military or has been in a special access program, maybe working, starting with military and then working for the alphabet soup, who has had exposure face-to-face, several have, by their account, with something non-human, and lived to be terrified by it. I don't know anybody who says that. If we could just get this big global paradigm shift, that we're not alone in this universe. It's just an absurd notion. And that just like the dialogues that we're having on this small scale, we had one on the whole planet, a large evolutionary, educational, big, huge discussion through all the media everywhere about what the true history of this planet and the solar system is in relationship to all kinds of life forms that have been here long before the 2 million year marker when there was a standing up primate in Africa. If we had a global dialogue, I am personally convinced that fear would not be the end result. That what humans would begin to understand is that we are remarkable in our souls, in our spirit, and our bodies that may not be made for going into outer space, but that we have minds and souls that dream about leaving planet Earth, and that we're now in the century where this could happen if we can get past self-destruction. And honesty and being able to talk with each other about what the truth is about our DNA, who we are, what other alien intelligences cohabit this planet, cohabit the solar system, cohabit the Milky Way galaxy. It will only make us stronger. And in strength is when I think that people then begin to reach out for light and life. And that is what I would wish for every single person who is here tonight and in the future. And on that note, Lori and Michael, I would like to say next week I'm going to bring you some interesting news, but I would also like to encourage those of you who have had unique experiences with out of body, with anything that falls into this category of a strange, highly strange moving smoke or fog or ectoplasm, to keep sending me your unique experiences. And maybe out of this, I've got a big file now, and it's going to get bigger. And out of this,
Linda?
we may work together. Yes.
I was wondering, before you close tonight, maybe you should mention your appearances at AlienCon.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you should tell the audience about the special surprise that you're working on. I think they'd be very excited to hear about it from you.
Okay. All right. Let's see. It's less than a month now, right? I get on an airplane on November 8th, and I take off for Baltimore. And it's going to be AlienCon like we did in Pasadena this past summer. And that was, what would you say, Lori? That was one of the most phantasmagorical experiences any of us have ever had. Photographs.
And we had so many people from the YouTube channel there too.
Yeah, and I welcome everybody who can be in Baltimore. Come and we will hug and shake our hands and we will talk about all of this together, which is what happened in Pasadena. It was like one big, huge happening love fest. And I'm expecting the same thing in Baltimore. Well, I'm going to be there the 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th. And in those days, I'm on panels. I'm going to do an updated presentation on new material about another very important story having to do with, is artificial intelligence an existential threat to humanity? And I have absolutely mind-blowing new material inside of that. And we are going to have a booth, is right, Lori? We're going to have a booth, and we're going to introduce, for the very first time, T-shirts for men, for women, for let's see, it's short sleeve, long sleeve. But here's the link. It was about 15 years ago that I was working on something one night late, and it had to do with dark and light and agendas, and I was in one of those moods with, why are we in a universe that has entropy? And this thought came into my mind: down with entropy, up with light. Linda, fight for light. Well, those are the themes that are going to be on my new t-shirts that we're going to introduce. And we're going to have a poster that will carry out that theme. And this is the very first time ever in my life that I have ever tried to extend some of my thoughts and these issues that we're all dealing with onto something like the t-shirts. And now I'm so excited about it. I cannot wait to be wearing one. And I hope you too. And we'll introduce it in Baltimore at this great booth, and Lori and Michael will be there in person all the time while I'm off having to do the autographs and the photographs and the panels and do the presentation and all of that. They will be manning the booth. For those of you who hear their voice and know that they're making this possible every Wednesday, you will be able to see them and hug them directly in Baltimore and see these brand new t-shirts from Linda and Earthfiles. Fight for light. Down with entropy. And we're going to have these at the Baltimore Alien Con, November 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th. And I really look forward to seeing you guys there and having discussions that we can only have face to face in a place like Alien Con. So I'll see a lot of you, I hope, there in November, and I'll see you here next Wednesday. And thank you for hanging in there with me on this unusual discussion about issues that, for the most part, we never have with anybody else in our life. Thank you.